out to the HRP guest line. We welcome in Tyler Dunn of the Go Long Substack, longtime Buffalo Bills beat reporter. Tyler, how's it going?
Doing great. Gosh, thanks so much for having me, man. How you been?
Doing pretty good.
Doing good, Tyler.
So I'll start here. It's interesting reading your story that you put up about the breakup that has happened with Diggs and the Bills. What's the main reason why? Because just reading your story, it feels like it's more of an issue about the direction of the Bills' offense that the team was heading in, less than his relationship with Josh Allen.
Right. I think the relationship with Josh Allen, it's probably a piece of the puzzle of discontent, but it's not the main piece. I wouldn't even say it's that big of a piece. It wasn't in Minnesota either with Kirk Cousins. I think a lot of people looked at that as a case of Stefon Diggs not wanting to play with Kirk Cousins. It was Mike Zimmer moving that offense a direction that he didn't like. It was, back to the mid-'90s, pounding the ball. He didn't like them throwing the ball all over the place. So he gets out of there. He's in the prime of his career. He had a little bit of deja vu this past season when Stefon Diggs is not a declining talent. And I get it. It's easy to pile on the guy in Western New York right now. They'll never trade him because of that $31 million dead cap hit. Our kind of thing, how the Bills never needed the guy. No, this is a talent. I mean, he had 834 yards and 7 touchdowns through 9 games. And he was on pace for a career season. Granted, they were right around 500. They make the change of coordinator. They start running the ball a hell of a lot more. And he basically, I think, as I wrote, became DJ Khaled on the track. Not a lot of impact there from Stefon Diggs. I don't think he was at fault. I think it was the direction of things. So we'll get into it. I mean, there are a lot of variables when it comes to Diggs, but I do think that he wanted out. And Brandon Beane was asked point blank at his press conference, the GM for the Bills, did Stefon Diggs and his representation ask for a trade? And he tap danced around it and cited a great relationship with Adisa Bakari, his agent. It doesn't take a law degree or anything to realize Stefon Diggs asked for a trade. He wanted out, and man, he landed in the best possible spot.
He sure did. You have C.J. Stroud. There's a lot of weapons there. But I do wonder, with all the weapons here, Tyler, with Nico Collins coming off of a breakout season, with Tank Dell having the rookie year that he had, Dalton Schultz is here already. I wonder how Diggs is going to handle perhaps not being featured as much. To your point about him not being used as much in the offense the second half of the season after their coordinator change. Yeah, but they also, the Bills, were 6-1 over that stretch. So I suppose, what is it that's going to keep a guy like Stefon Diggs happy when, if you take a look at where he's been his whole career, in Minnesota, they never had a losing record. The Bills, they made the playoffs every single year. Seems like he has some very, very high demands.
You're not wrong. I mean, you're winning games. So can you really be that ticked off if you're Stefon Diggs? I think, and it's only Stefon Diggs knows what's going through the brain of Stefon Diggs, but I think on top of this, he didn't have a good relationship with Sean McDermott. And I've had multiple players tell me that as recently as this week. One player said, he heard that this was in the works for several weeks. Since the season ended, Diggs made it pretty clear he was done with Sean. Now, Sean McDermott is the head coach, and yeah, he did kind of move the offense this direction, but I think that disconnect existed long before that. So, DeMeco Ryans is probably going to need to develop a strong relationship with Stefon Diggs, and I think I was just talking to Herm Edwards, and he was Tony Dungy's right-hand man in Tampa, head coach, Jets, Chiefs. We all hear from Herm. He kind of put it best. He learned this from Tony. He said, if you're the head coach, you really got to take on 3 or 4 of those personalities on your roster and build a real, authentic relationship with that player. We all know who they are. They all always need a little special treatment. I just don't think that Sean McDermott and Stefon Diggs ever really meshed. They're two very different people. Oil and water. It never really worked, and Diggs eventually wanted out, and the Bills were happy to oblige. And maybe that final straw was the latest cryptic tweet that Diggs had kind of taking a shot at Josh Allen. But, this isn't the first time we've talked about a wide receiver, coming with some baggage. I mean, the Bills knew what they were taking on. He did this in Minnesota, and a lot of receivers are demonstrative on the sideline. A lot of receivers have the cryptic tweets and the off-field interest with the fashion shows. I mean, I don't really think anything Stefon Diggs did in Buffalo was super detrimental to the final score. He had the bad drop against the Chiefs. You can point to that, and you can point to some poor playoff games. But all the other stuff, I don't know. I feel like that's just par for the course for a wide receiver one.
Talking with Tyler Dunn of the Go Long Substack here on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Tyler, were you surprised that the Bills were willing to make this trade to a team in the AFC that's so clearly on the rise, like the Houston Texans?
I was. I really thought that both sides, everything I just said being true, would realize they're best together, that Diggs would want to stay with Josh Allen and realize, look, there is a path for him in this offense, in this city, and that the Bills would realize, man, we can't part with a true number one who's still in the prime of his career. And then that was the shocking part of it, to see them basically pass the baton to the Texans and say, all right, you're the Super Bowl contender now. This season is yours if you want it. You lifted off the weapons. Man, I spent some time with Nico Collins for a feature last year down there. That dude is special. You don't see receivers of that size move like him. And Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz, and Joe Mixon. It's a scary offense. So I just think it kind of speaks to how bad it probably was behind the scenes. Maybe there's something we don't know. Whoever's at fault between the Bills and Diggs, because you rarely see a team with a Josh Allen in his prime. And look, Josh Allen's not going to be able to play this way forever. He runs through people, around people, over people. He can throw it through a cement wall. But you want him in full. You don't want to sanitize his game like they tried to early last season. So when you let Josh Allen be Josh Allen, it's not going to last for 5 to 10 years. So I was stunned. I guess to answer your question, stunned. He went to the Texans. I thought that they would take less just to send him to the NFC. But it does speak to maybe there is something that we don't know, and maybe we'll never know.
I got a kick out of some of the parts of your most recent column on your Substack about Stefon Diggs. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier, talking with Herm Edwards, and you also referenced Andy Reid with this line that really jumped out to me. Every team has a few players that require more attention from the head coach. And to what you have just been talking about, clearly Sean McDermott and Stefon Diggs, that didn't work. Isaiah McKenzie, a teammate of Stefon Diggs, joked that he was the one that would tell him, Diggs, to chill the bleep out when he had temper tantrums. I guess, is that just something that somebody in the Texans organization is going to have to take on their own, whether it's DeMeco Ryans or C.J. Stroud?
Yes. Yes. I mean, that was brought up by Isaiah McKenzie more than once over the 2 seasons we did a show at Go Long. It was comical. I mean, he basically was Stefon Diggs' babysitter. There was the loss to Jacksonville. He remembered Diggs kind of losing his mind that he wasn't getting the ball and the team wasn't playing well, and that stuff would happen often. And when you've got veterans on the roster, I think guys like Isaiah McKenzie, who are just honest, they'd give it back to him and kind of call him out on the 10% of times when he was just blatantly false. Because a lot of the times he had a point, with whatever he was complaining about, according to McKenzie, but you do need to have that presence. And maybe there is somebody on that roster who knows Stefon Diggs and has the clout in the locker room, offense or defense, that can kind of keep him in check. Because to your point earlier, it's going to happen. There's only one ball to go around. There's going to be games when he only gets 4 or 5 targets. And if he is concerned about winning a Super Bowl, he's going to have to take on a lesser role. So, whether it's a coach, it's a player, I think that's really important because, look, McKenzie wasn't on the team last year. There were some other veterans that I'm sure played that role that weren't on the team last year, and maybe that's the reason things did kind of boil over the way they did.
I can't say that that's the best, most ringing endorsement I've ever heard for a player. Tyler. So, out of curiosity, just based off that, I'm gonna take a guess here at a player. I'm just curious. Do we know do you know much about the relationship that Stefon Diggs has with Case Keenum, since he's still the backup quarterback? Because right now I feel like Case Keenum needs to be the Stefon Diggs whisperer when he gets to town.
I don't know anything about their relationship. I don't want to sound like the bearer of bad news, because I think the Texans should be jacked to get Stefon Diggs. I just think if you're that talented, you're going to have some shit to you to some degree. Like, there's going to be something. Like, you're going to have to deal with. You look at the draft, and you see it at wide receiver and you see it at cornerback. Like, when you're going through the negatives, the cons, whatever these scouts are saying is a knock on a prospect, like, give me the knocks that you get on a Stefon Diggs, because he cares. He's competitive. He's going to fight. You know, when they lost that 13 seconds game to the Chiefs, I had a player tell me he was in that locker room screaming. Like, again, it's the same thing again. I mean, that's what the team needed. All right, this is a team that's been banging their head against the wall here for 5-6 years, and maybe their window did close. I don't think it did, because they have Josh Allen, but they might have lost their chance at a Super Bowl when you had a receiver in his prime there. And he would speak up, and I think to an extent that is absolutely needed. Side note, Diggs, he's back when he was coming out of college, he's interviewing with NFL teams, and they'd ask him, like, man, it looked like you took some plays off there that senior year. I should say, before they even asked him that, Diggs was the first to say, yeah, I did take some plays off because, I was making business decisions. I didn't want to get hit. But he's going to be honest with you, is my point. Like, he'll be up front, he'll be honest, he'll say what's on his mind, and he'll be competitive as hell. So I think this is a good situation for him. It's just going to take the threading of a needle, right? You're going to need a veteran or two who will be able to speak up to him. And I think that having a former player as a coach who gets it is going to be huge. He hasn't had that his whole career. He's had Mike Zimmer and Sean McDermott. I think DeMeco Ryans, everything I've heard on the guy is he relates to players in a way that the prior to just cannot.
To put a further positive spin on some of the stuff that you were just saying, in your piece, it says that Bills teammates agreed with Stefon Diggs' very honest and candid comments 90% of the time. The other 10% of the times, that was where somebody like Isaiah McKenzie had to step in and say, okay, dude, relax just a little bit.
Exactly, right? I mean, and that, there's going to be some lines that are crossed, and you're going to need somebody to point out that line was crossed. Like if he's being hypocritical, or if he's complaining about something that he shouldn't be. Look, the last tweet where he kind of takes the shot at Josh Allen responding to somebody on Twitter. Well, somebody said, you need the great quarterback, not the great receiver. I'm paraphrasing, and Diggs is like, you sure? I mean, to take a public shot at your quarterback is not ideal. So I imagine Isaiah would have spoken up in that case. But, hey, maybe this all kind of – we see this with some receivers, right? Later in their career, when they've kind of been through the ringer, that they're willing to take a step back to a degree. Like, I don't think Stefon Diggs is going to Houston expecting 12, 13, 14 targets a game. I mean, he's got to know that Nico Collins is a star, that Tank Dell is an ascending star, that they've got other weapons, and C.J. Stroud's a young quarterback. I don't think you're just dropping this poison into something that's really, really good. I think he'll be an asset.
You can find Tyler on Twitter at Ty Dunn with the two N's there, and at golongtd.com. Tyler Dunn covering the Buffalo Bills in the past, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Buffalo News. Make sure you check out his work. Great stuff. Appreciate you coming on, and maybe we'll have you on before the Texans and Bills play on a primetime game this year, because I feel like that's the direction we're headed now after this trade.
Absolutely, man. I'd love to anytime, and definitely try to check in on those Texans as much as I can at Go Long if people want to check it out.
It's good Substack. Tyler, thanks, man.
Thank you.